We ready?
Who's chewing on a bone?
Who's chewing?
Minka. Do you want me to get it?
Yeah.
Go get it. Go.
The sounds like in the headphones are the worst. Like listening to the dogs chew.
Yeah. Yep.
Over here. I just need some Carmex or else I'm gonna like freak out.
The chapstick. All right. Hold the microphone close and no rambling.
No rambling.
Listen to yourself in your headphones when you're talking because everybody does this. So make sure that you're actually like using your headphones and listening to your own voice as you're speaking.
Check.
We're talking more kind of like this into the front. Okay?
Wait, front and back.
Okay.
Wait, back, front.
Make sure you don't shuffle the microphone too much. We really need microphone stands. No, you're talking into the front here.
Right here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Are you looking at me waiting
so
for
much-
me to check?
More professional this time
I'm not as high.
around. Get high.
Alrighty. Are we ready? We're going to talk about reactivity.
Let's do it.
Hello, and welcome back to the Everyday Trainer podcast. My name is Meg, and I am a dog trainer. On today's episode, I'm joined by Clayton and Wensley of Austin Dog Culture. They are dog trainers here in Austin. I'm visiting them. Clayton has been on the podcast before. Everybody loves that episode. So this is our sequel to that. And we're going to talk all about reactivity, what we've kind of learned as pet dog trainers in the industry as far as solving reactivity goes, and so much more. So you know the drill. Grab yourself a tasty drink and meet us back here. Hello, Clayton.
That was really good.
Thank you. That was really good. Thank you. I told you it's the most impressive part of the whole podcast experience. Do you like how we like go in on the beat too?
I was just saying, so the first time that I was on, we didn't do that.
Didn't do what?
We didn't do. There wasn't like an intro.
Oh no, I did the intro afterwards,
Like
but
later.
now that I have like a thing.
Yeah, we were just like on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
Was it a Zoom call?
Yeah. But now we're in person, so we can use it on like the mixing board thing. Hello, Wensley.
Hello, Meg.
Thanks for being here
Thanks for having me.
in your own apartment.
Yep, in my living room. Thanks for being here.
So, Clayton, when did I have you on the podcast last?
Like 3 years ago, because we
Was it 3 years ago?
That's crazy. So, Clayton was one of my first guests on. I mean, that was only a couple episodes deep, and we talked a lot about the culture of dog training, which is why his business is called Austin Dog Culture. So this was 3 years ago, and we were already kind of talking about the changes that we're seeing in the industry as far as like pet ownership goes, like what people are doing and why we're seeing so many behavioral issues. And one of the biggest behavioral issues that I work with and my trainers work with, and I know you guys work with also, is reactivity. Like reactivity is one of those things that everybody thinks that their dog is reactive, or like a lot of people do actually have reactive dogs. Reactivity in my kind of definition, and just to like keep it really simple, is basically when your dog has some sort of explosive reaction to some sort of trigger, and there's typically a barrier involved. So the barrier is either like a leash or a door or a fence, something that creates that level of frustration. Mm-hmm. Right?
Mm-hmm. I really feel like reactivity is driving or fueling the pet dog industry right now anyways. Like I feel like there's not a lot of things that will actually make people pick up the phone and research a trainer, fill out a contact form faster than reactivity. And I think it's because it's embarrassing for most people.
I mean, I
it's
hear that from a lot of
embarrassing, and
people.
you can't like do anything with a reactive dog. Like if your dog is actually like truly exploding at other dogs, like think about the lesson today and how many people had dogs. Like we were in this little apartment area and every single person outside had a dog, and there was a lot of people outside. Like that was crazy.
Yep.
You know, so like if you have a reactive dog, like your dog is like, let's say they're reactive to other dogs, like your dog is probably exploding all the time, you know? And so then you get those people who are like, well, I walk my dog at midnight, you know, when nobody else is outside because I just can't deal with
There's
it.
almost no way to, if you have a reactive dog, to not look like an asshole. Like I really feel like that's why so many people pick up the phone and call a trainer, because you know, like if you're out walking your dog and they have an explosion, it's like if you don't do anything, you kind of look like an asshole. And if you're trying to correct the dog, you look like
You
an
get
asshole.
judged. You get canceled.
So it's kind of like I feel like there's no way to like walk a reactive dog without some point looking like an asshole. And somebody has that really embarrassing moment, and that's the thing that makes them call a trainer. And so I really feel like that's driving the pet dog training industry right now is that one behavior.
I also think too, a lot of people, either they've done their research and they will label it reactivity, or they truly to their core believe their dog is protecting them. Like he's fine in the home, but he's very territorial and protective of me on walks. And they're just like misreading the situation too.
Yeah,
So,
I get that, and I also get like, oh, he's just excited.
Yeah,
he just wants to say hi, and it's like a dog at the end of like a tight leash on a harness, like barking nonstop, and it's like, no, like we cannot reinforce this behavior, and that's, you know, like the dog that you're training now, that's like that dog is.
I wouldn't call her reactive.
I wouldn't call her reactive either, right? She just gets like a bark, you know? She's not like having this like big explosion. She's just like, ah, and like has to yell.
that's kind of like Crew though. Like if we see someone, it's like emotion, like, and then it's over.
Yeah.
'Cause he knows.
He has like a really like quick recovery with it. And I think that's another kind of like indication of reactivity is like how quickly the dog recovers.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like that's always the goal, is like faster recovery times, even if you are struggling with reactivity. Okay, so I want to hear like your take on it. Why do you think so many dog owners are struggling with reactivity? Like I know the reasons why I think people have reactive dogs, and we saw it a lot today in the lesson that you had, but like let's talk about that.
Where does one start?
That's such a deep hole. You know, I'll say that I think that really just my business name, Austin Dog Culture, where that stems from is I think also where reactivity stems from. So like to me, you know, the reason it's called Austin Dog Culture is because I actually found myself constantly talking about the culture that we have surrounding dog ownership in this city, and like what does that culture look like. And it's, to me, it's super upside down. Like it's super upside down, the way the things that people expect of their dogs, also combined with the way that they live with their dogs, is a recipe for disaster. Like they have to be able to go to the dog park and be social, and they have to tolerate all kinds of bullshit that's at the dog park, and they also have to be able to be calm at the coffee shop, and they have to be able to go to brunch, but they also want to stop and say hi to every dog that they see on the sidewalk. Like
that's the big thing that like I saw today, and even
it's a lot
like that. Okay, so he's training this little Malinois puppy, and the dog,
perfect.
she's perfect. She's very
perfect.
cute. She's just like a Malinois, but she has like that, bah! Like every now and then. It's literally because every single dog would walk up, or every single owner would walk up and be like, "Oh my gosh, is that this dog?" And then Clayton,
There's a lot of
Clayton would be
expectation.
like, "Yeah," and then they just let their dog drag over to see her. Like every single person, you know, like. The first day there was this little dachshund that like ran out, and I literally like kicked the dog away, But the guy was like nice about it. He was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I know you guys are training. Like, she just wanted to say hi to, you know, your dog because like they know each other." So he's like, "Oh, this is okay for like my dog to like run up." And I did the like,
But that also
like
happened
the
today.
goalie thing.
That happened today.
I know,
with
that's
the
what I'm
dog.
saying.
Every time you're out with the dog. I also think too, whether the reactivity is stemming from overexcitement or maybe like insecurity or fear, either way, there's a complete like disregard for the owner. There's no sort of like, hey, I'm going to check in with my mom or dad first. Like whoever's
No
at the other end of that. Like
respect.
I was trying not to say that, but yeah.
Just say it.
Hurt the
No
people's
Oh, you mean
feelings.
from like the dog?
The dog
like
is
the
just
dog doesn't
outliving-
respect.
Yeah, there's no regard like for the decisions they make. Like the owner
But
doesn't
I mean-
factor in. Like they just
Right,
do
but
what
like,
they're going to do.
why does the dog not respect the owner's decision making? Because like the owner just allows, you know, every single dog to run up and like greet their dog.
Well, they're just super permissive with how they live.
Right. It's just like
day
the
in and day
dog
out.
making decisions 24/7.
Yep.
So to me that's where the Austin dog culture came from, and that's to me also the same thing that causes reactivity is the going back to the everything. What am I trying to say? Like all the little things that you do with the dog, every little interaction that you have throughout the day, I believe is what creates the problems that we have. Like it's so easy to hyper focus on like the behavior that is making us embarrassed of ourselves or the dog, as opposed to zooming way out and going like, well, like the dog is kind of like not able to be crated if it's home, or like while you're home, the dog can't be crated.
Right.
You know, the dog is like busting out of the front door. The dog is like leaning into the leash constantly and you know, dragging the owner to the grass to go to the bathroom or to go say hi to another dog. Like it's constantly happening throughout the day, and we are super permissive, and the dog just, it sees stuff and it says I want it and it moves towards it, and there's never a consequence for just leaving the owner and moving towards things that it wants. And then eventually, if, you know, through thousands of repetitions, there's an expectation now on the dog's end. And when we can't meet that expectation, that's where the reactivity comes from. But again, it's just this super permissive lifestyle of just give, take the dog everywhere, and then expect the dog to have perfect behavior in the presence of like other dogs, which is really just a trigger for excitement now.
Right.
That's where all that shit comes from.
I think there's something to be said too about, I mean, obviously people rescue dogs who are not puppies, but I think there's a lot to be said about the root of reactivity, where people think, you know, they hear socialize your puppy. So they take their puppy out and what do? They socialize it. They let everybody say hi to it. Every dog come up to it and say hi. So when they're out, if it's reactivity stemming from overexcitement, it's from this expectation, this anticipation that has basically just been groomed into the dog. Like when I'm out in public, like all of this is for me. Like I expect all of the attention, all the interaction, and it kind of starts you down a slippery slope instead of practicing being out in public like neutral. Like just that's not for you. Not everybody, not every dog passing by is for you. And I think that's where owners try to do the right thing when they're researching and accidentally kind of veer left, if you will, and go down the rabbit hole and then kind of lay the foundation for a reactive dog. And then on top of everything Clayton said too, it just like all kind of bleeds together into creating this issue.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's just all of these little things that we're doing throughout the day that are leading to just, I don't want to say like bad relationships with your dog, but the external environment is just like so rewarding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can I say something very controversial?
Yeah. We love it.
Should we allow it?
Yeah, can I just, I always punish reactivity. Like people are constantly talking about like, how do you fix reactivity? And it's like, it's not something that I even focus on when I'm out training. Like I rarely go out and go, we're going to do a reactivity session. Like I genuinely feel like it happens through every little interaction that I have throughout the day. And so like if the dog jumps on me, like I'm going to punish that. I don't want a dog jumping on me. I don't want it to learn that pushy behavior. If the dog tries to bolt out the door, I'm going to punish it. And throughout the day, I'm basically just showing the dog, hey, like you can't get away with this just, you know, overly anxious, like over the top, just moving towards everything 100 miles an hour. Like that's not going to fly. And so by the time that we're out and the dog actually does the behavior, I'm like, no, you can't do that. And we just continue to move forward. And of course we're going to work the dog through it. And of course I'm going to use food. And like, of course, you know, if the behavior is bad enough, we can even go into some counter conditioning. But like, honestly, I don't feel like there's as many dogs, and I'm just speaking of the dogs that we have here in Texas. It could be different if you're in New York or something like that, but I don't think that we have a lot of dogs with like super deep-seated, emotionally charged levels of reactivity. I think it's very much just like dogs that like they don't get told no, like ever. When someone is telling me they have a reactive dog, one of the first things that I ask people is I go, what do you do when he does X? Like the barking, lunging, growling. And people are like, they just look at me like with a blank stare. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm like, what do you do when he does that? And people never have an answer. They go, well, we like tell him no or like whatever. And then
I always say, how do you tell your dog?
No?
Yeah. Like, how do you tell your dog no?
Right.
Like what is no followed up with?
Did you teach that?
And so I tell people, I go, okay, so like if you were to rob a bank and I were to go, Megan, no. like, dude, the next time you need money, you're going to rob a bank. And so like to me, like, of course we want to change the way the dog feels about the trigger. Like, of course, like I want to use food and like reward the dog for making like good decisions. But I don't think that any of these behaviors are so like heavily conditioned and like rooted emotional, like that the dog is unable to, because people are like, oh well, when the dog is reacting, he's like, you know, his brain is in a different, you know, area.
That
and like
is
he
just
can't,
the internet, though. That is like not actually the case. And that's how you know people who are like genuinely training dogs versus people who are just like training their own dog and are like, this is what I've seen with this one dog. And it's like, yeah, maybe your dog has like some deep rooted like issues and fears and reactivity and blah, blah, blah. But like 90% of the reactive dogs that we train are just dogs that have literally never been told no before. Yep. And so you teach them and you say punishment and people are going to be like, but like punishment is literally like a tink, like pop on the leash, you know, like that little puppy. I mean, I don't want to say puppy, like what, 7 months old?
She's 7 months old, but we're talking about the little Malinois.
Yeah. Like she's tiny little pop on the leash and she's like, oh, you know,
I'm so
like,
sorry.
Yeah. Like,
I'm so sorry.
It's not like you're like cranking your dog to get them to stop, you know? And I've talked about how I solve reactivity, and like in previous episodes, I'm really big on like correcting the intention. Yeah. So like, you know, when you see the dog really like fixating and loading on the trigger, give a pop on the leash. They're like, oh, my bad. Bring your attention back over to me. Add some movement, you know, like,
but if you don't
disrupt it.
But if you don't change every little interaction that you have up leading to that moment, I think that's where like the difference between like as a dog trainer, you get that, but as a pet person, people don't understand. And that's why I say like you can't, to me, like I'm never like, we're going to have a session where we work on reactivity. Because I think if
that's just like part of training is like, you can't be an asshole.
I will say
exactly.
Like I will say, I think that I will spend an ample amount of time focusing with clients on educating them on body language so they can learn to read their dog instead of all of a sudden the explosions happened. I'm like, well, now you're going to have to use more forceful correction or punishment. And when you could have just used, honestly, like a super small little like dink, you know, just to interrupt that before it got to that escalation.
And two, I think a big emphasis for me is on those little things, right? So like, don't let your dog drag you up to other dogs. Like anytime I have a reactive dog, I'm like, you know, walking with the owner and they're like, oh, this is, you know, Jack, the dog that lives next door. He just wants to say hi. And I'm like, we're not doing this anymore. We're not like saying hi to other dogs anymore. Like Jack. You're struggling with reactivity. Like you need to be neutral. We need to focus on being neutral. And everybody wants to like get hung up on like, oh, I want to create a positive association to like dogs. So I get them working for food. My order is like, we need to teach the leash, right? Because you have no way to communicate with the dog unless you teach the leash. Teach the leash, stop the behavior, get to neutral.
Yep.
And then we can start working the dog for food and like building up those new feelings around the triggers. But I will say, once you stop the behavior, that solves like 90% of people's problems, because most dogs have just never been told no.
Right,
Like you ask owners, what do you do when your dog is being reactive? And what do? They stand back at the end of a tight leash with their dog on a harness, and they're basically reinforcing reactivity, because like it's a self-reinforcing behavior. The dogs like get enjoyment out of it. That's what you're doing when you're training like a sport dog.
It's like the reverse engineering you were talking about earlier.
Right. So like with pet dogs that like struggle with reactivity, it's the opposite of, sport dogs, where we're literally training the dog to be reactive. I want them to, bark and
it's funny. So
do
like
things.
Like if you look at like we were watching videos of Dinky doing bite work when I first got her. Zero control on the dog, right? Like she was a green dog. She didn't have ass from her face. Like she's just super brand new. And if you look at the videos of her doing bite work, she is like at the end of the leash in a harness, like spinning, barking, lunging, just crazy, trying to get the sleeve out of Will's hand. And I sometimes, like when we're talking about like, like if we go to club and then on the drive home, we're like having a discussion about how our night went. Like I've told Wensley multiple times, like how I miss some of the fire that she had when she was younger. And a lot of the reason that fire is gone is because the obedience that I've had to put on her to get through the levels of PSA. And just by putting a little obedience on her has made it more difficult for me to get her agitated in the bite work, because I've put that obedience on her. And it's not like I've used a ton of compulsion. It's just
really trained her, honestly, force free.
Like I've trained Nikki mostly force free.
The majority.
So
of it.
okay, so that's a good segue that we can go into, because I've told everybody now publicly that like I mostly punish reactivity. But okay, let's also talk about and this is going to piss people off because I'm going to say it in the same podcast. There are some dogs that I don't ever punish the reactivity. And it's because like that little dog that I'm training right now, I really don't punish her.
No.
Because the food drive is there and the reactivity really, to me, isn't. Like it's just a byproduct of like if you leave her unmanaged.
She's just like pumped.
Yeah, like she's just it's just a little Malinois, of course. Like she just wants to do things. And so she's a dog that like you could condition a really powerful response to a clicker, and every time she heard, the jingle of another dog's like collar, or if she had a dog that come around the corner and she like locked eyes with them, she's got enough food drive that you could click and she would just turn around and come off of that. And we already do that with just the yes command, like you've seen us do that. But like there's also like those dogs where I think if you look at my training, you go, wow, you're training kind of purely positive right now. But it's like, because I can. This dog's got so much food motivation that I can do that. And I have the skill set to do that. But the reason I say a lot of reactivity or most reactivity, I just punish it, is because most of the dogs I work with don't have that level of food drive because they're overfed. They've never worked for their food, and they've never been told no. And usually in the beginning, they won't take food at all. And then I go, hey, don't do that. They get their feelings hurt for like maybe like 30 seconds. And then now their arousal has actually gone down and they actually start taking food.
Yeah.
In the same
Every
vein,
time. It's how it goes.
In the same vein of dogs have never been told no, that dog Coda that I trained and we went over to do the evaluation. These people were going to rehome
that would be a good story for this podcast.
So these people reached out just wanting professional help to kind of get an evaluation done on their dog. It was the German Shepherd,
to rehome
Blue
the dog.
Heeler, Malinois mix, right? So a lot going on there. And they'd worked with trainers previously in the past and they wanted to rehome the dog, right? So we went over to do an evaluation, see what we could do to help them kind of get the dog into a home that fit. And honestly, like it wasn't that bad. Truly, like we just corrected the dog one time for having a massive explosion.
It was a big display.
It was a big explosion.
We took Darla in the backyard just because I wanted to see how bad the reactivity
Darla
was.
is Clayton's coonhound, if people don't know.
Because we're just going to help them rehome the dog. Like this wasn't like training. Like they just wanted us to evaluate to help them rehome because it was going to go to a sport home.
Okay.
And And so, like Wensley said, it's like a Dutchie healer or something mix. And so we bring Darla, my coonhound, in the backyard, who like doesn't give a shit about nobody. And like we bring her in the backyard, and this dog's like wah 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 wah, just barking its head off. And Darla just like looking at it like, I'm trying to sniff. Could you be quiet, please? Like doesn't care. But this dog is reacting to a fairly neutral dog. And at the time, I think she was like on like a martingale or like a flat collar or something. And I put a prong collar on her, and I just said, hey, I'm going to just correct her to see how she responds to a correction, because, you know, part of it was like, if she's going to be rehomed, I need to know, like, if I put a little bit of pressure on this dog, is this dog going to redirect? Or like you kind of need to know those things.
Yes.
So I'm like, hey, like, I'm going to punish her and see what she does. Dude, I punish, like, she runs out to the end of the leash. I give her one little leash jerk. It really wasn't a lot. She goes, "Erp," and she turned around and came back and looked at me and like, just like stared at me.
We started a program a couple weeks later, and like I had to correct that dog maybe once, twice, dude, and the rest of the time I was just feeding her.
But what's crazy is I looked at the lady, I looked at the wife, and I said, hey, look, I was like, I know you're just here for us to evaluate the dog so you can rehome it. I go, if you want to keep your dog, because she was crying when we were there evaluating the dog. I was like, if you want to keep your dog, I was like, this is super fixable. And, you know, the people that she worked with before, just, I guess no one had ever punished her. She had been told to like hold a treat above her shoulder when they walk past other dogs. But I cannot stress to everybody listening enough how little we actually corrected that dog. I think
truly a handful of times.
Like in over the course of, we only did a 3-week program because it was that mild.
By the end of it, I had them walking with me in the domain on a Sunday, so busy. And this dog was beautiful. Had like the tiniest little grumble, and
Did they end up keeping it?
Yeah, they kept it.
They kept the dog.
They still have the dog?
They still have the dog.
The review is on our website.
Aww.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, Meg,
they were awesome clients.
This dog took like minimal correction.
Yeah.
It's like they were about to rehome
and they were about to get rid of the dog
that they loved, because no trainer had been like, hey, let's just interrupt and correct that behavior.
That's what fucking sends me, is it's like,
it was crazy.
I will be the quote bad guy, right? The person who's like, just give your dog a quick pop and you can keep it. You can keep your dog.
Like, isn't that or like the lesser of two evils, if you will? Like,
what's the other option? You get rid of your dog and it's probably not going to make it, you know? Like, that's what I hate so much, is like, I get attacked on the internet all the time for just anything. I could like blink and like the force-free community comes for me. But I am literally saving dogs.
Okay.
You know,
yeah,
because like people are on the verge of getting rid of their dogs. And I'm like, has anyone told you to tell your dog no? Has anybody taught you how to have like a meaningful way to tell your dog that they can't do that behavior? And they're like, no. Like, why?
You want to talk about ethics? It's more ethical to tell the dog no once than to uproot its life and rehome it.
This is what's crazy, though. This is what's crazy. If you think about it, if we did 3 weeks of training, okay, it was a 3-week program, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
If we did 3 weeks of training, that means, and you train that dog like at least like over an hour a day for sure, right?
Yeah, hour to 2 hours. Yeah, I took her with me a lot of places.
So let's say you did 15 hours of training, 5 days a week over 3 weeks, 15 hours of training minimum.
I can't do math even that quick on the fly.
So
you made me
in that 15 hours of training, let's say that dog got 3 corrections.
Yeah.
And the other 15 hours of training, you probably were using a lot of reinforcement, right?
Yeah, if she didn't have an explosion and checked in, it was boom.
It's crazy because I can sit on this podcast and I can say that we almost always punish reactivity, but I can also still say that like we have a reinforcement based training program, because 90% of that training was positive reinforcement. 98% of it was positive reinforcement.
To the point that we now have that protocol that we do with almost all of our clients, where it's like, stop feeding your dog breakfast and dinner. It's like, it's going to have one portion, condense it. I will feed it.
Yeah.
If it's out
And
and
we
it's
use that for the training, right?
Oh, that has been a
it
battle.
really is a game changer.
But that has been like a battle for
really.
Yeah. I think the people who are like really struggling with their dog, they're like, yeah, like whatever we need to do. But sometimes I get the owners who are like, I just want a well-trained dog. And I'm like, okay, don't feed them. All of their food is going to be used in training. Like I need that positive reinforcement. And then they give them like 17 meals a day. And it just is so hard to train without just relying on like leash pressure.
Totally.
You know,
Wensley, what was that dog that we trained? The little black dog that was reactive.
Koa?
No.
How long ago?
What's the dog's name? Man, I don't know. I'm trying to. Sabrina and Sky.
Oh, Sky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I can remember their name. So, Meg, this dog Sky, this girl, she adopted the dog from the shelter, brought it home, was having some pretty bad reactivity, some dog reactivity on the leash. And we start the training. It's like the first day, dog is blowing up on the leash, has zero food drive. It's like a Monday. And so I told her, I said, okay. I said, we're going to pause the training. And I said, I need you to get her on a feeding schedule of basically we're going to only feed her while we're out training. Mm-hmm. And you're going to do that. Mm-hmm. And then next week, we're going to restart the training. She did exactly that. So we bring the dog out for training. We offer the dog the food. The dog doesn't take the food. Then we go, cool. We put it back in the bag. We finish up our walk. We go back inside, and like that's it. And that was the dog's opportunity to eat. And normally I'll give the dog 2 chances a day. Like I'll say, hey, do that in the morning. If the dog doesn't take any of their breakfast, like we'll try again at dinner time.
Especially in the beginning when they're figuring it out.
Yeah, and we just do that. So she did that for a week. We come back in the training, and the dog's food drive has gone from literally none to through the roof to the point where I no longer even have to correct this dog for reactivity, because every time it looked at a dog, you just go, yes. She would just turn around and just throw her face into your palm and just try and like just eat your fingers off. Yeah. And it was like I'm telling you, the week prior, zero food drive. And at that point, like we ended up doing some like very like kind of like fancy competition style obedience, because the dog was just super active little.
I just want to work. Tell me
That
what to
reminds me
do.
of Telly, that little white dog with the blue eyes. Kind of a similar.
Yeah. Once the food
is.
drive just gets there, it's so nice. And that's why I say like I will sit here and say that I mostly punish reactivity when it happens, because we're just going to do that on the fly and then we're going to keep training. But like there are definitely dogs when they have great food drive that like, yeah, like
that food drive supersedes that need to react.
You could almost say that the training turns into like a purely positive program, but it isn't, because like I am punishing the dog in other areas of life.
But you're not having to. You know, you're not having to correct for reactivity all the time, because like you're not giving the dog the opportunity to explode.
We're just
because
doing
you've
so
like
much.
Built up obedience, you've built up food drive, like you've done the things.
Yeah, we're just playing. We're just like, I've just taken the dog out and we're just playing.
You kind of set the tone in the first day or two, right? And it's like, hey, I don't take no shit, right? And the dog's like, got it, word. Like, nobody ever told me that before.
Hey, we're not, it's just basically, hey, we're not doing that, but we can do all this other stuff. And I promise you, it's also fun.
You know who you should talk about is Porter.
Oh, yeah, Porter.
That's a good one.
Porter was...
Because that concept of, like, the heel is his job.
Yeah.
Because that was a really difficult
Remember that
reactivity
little
case.
pit bull that I was struggling with?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. That dog.
Oh my God.
Well, so
God.
So you know what's funny? Oh my God.
I couldn't help it.
This he was bad to the point, I had to bring him home, and he was just like one of those silent killers. Like he would just be so quiet, and then just where people say like he came out of nowhere. Like surely if you don't know what you're looking at, it looks like that for him.
Yeah.
It's not out of nowhere, but it looks like it.
Very
and dude, I'll never forget that dog gave me the worst training session of my life. Like most embarrassing. Like I took him home. I did like a week of in-person training.
Yeah. I do remember this dog.
And then I did 2 weeks of boarding and training, and like I'm telling you, the dog was doing phenomenal. Like we were at that bougie like domain area, And I had him like doing downstays in the Nike store while like I shopped around. We're like walking down like very busy like areas where there's like bars and restaurants. Like he was doing super well. So well that like I told the owner like, hey, this is where I've been training, super crowded place. This is where you should meet me so I can basically show off where he's at. I was super proud of him. And like I'm telling you, like we've been there for 5 minutes. Like just got out of the car, put him in a downstay. He's holding his downstay. Me and the owners are talking. And this little bitty Shih Tzu thing walks by. And he's like, I'm going to kill it. And just beelines it for this dog. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, what the? Yeah. And so, like, I run over and, like, literally I'm doing the, like, this is the first time he's ever done this. And it really, and for me, it was. For me, it was like, yes, like, he was reactive before. But then, you know, we got to a point where it was like he just didn't do that. And, you know, he'd never.
Loose. No.
I was like, which heathen is that?
Mine.
There's
no,
too many plots.
He never like broke a downstay to go like attack a dog that was. I mean, this dog was literally like 50 yards away. And when he got up to the dog, he didn't even. It's like he didn't know what to do. Like he was just like kind of like barking and standing there. And I just kind of grabbed him and was like, dude, what are you fucking doing? But here's the thing. That's not even the worst part. Then I was like, okay, shake it off. I was like, I don't know what that was. Let's start taking him for a walk. Let's go walk around the domain like I normally do. Again, this is where I've got him in downstays while we're shopping and doing all kinds of stuff. This dog proceeds to attack people. This dog.
He called me so sad.
I'm gonna get in trouble for laughing at that.
This dog starts.
I remember you calling me after this.
Yeah, he starts attacking people as we're walking down the sidewalk. Mainly people with like bags. And I'll never forget like this like super old like Chinese man. You know, like a small Chinese person, like how they. You know, like a small, like this guy was like.
I don't know where we're going with this.
I'm just saying, like the guy, like was like 5 foot.
Okay.
Like he was a very small man.
Okay.
And he had to be like like in his 60s. And this dog, like as we're walking by, I'm like, of all people, like leave that little man alone. Like holy shit. But anyways, this dog, man, proceeded to embarrass the shit out of me. And I was like, the only thing I could imagine was like, well, you guys are here now, and he didn't do that.
Do you remember what I said?
Yeah, it's the owners. Or
it's
the
not,
wife for him.
It's not necessarily like the owners. It's like the dog knows that like you won't correct.
That's the relationship.
Right. Like you're not going to correct the dog like
I would.
Right.
Yeah. And it wasn't for lack of trying. Like they really did try. I feel like but now for everybody listening, I can actually say this. That dog was actually found on the streets. Like when he was like maybe 4 months old, like he was found like
a little scrawny
behind like a dumpster. Like he really was like from the streets, I guess, you know. Like he was about that
scrappy street dog.
And you know, like I ended up I called Danny Wells.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey man, I was like, this dog. I was like, I really needed some like some affirmation from somebody that, you know, that I look up to say like you're doing the right thing, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, for anybody that cares, kind of like what we ended up doing with that dog was just treating the heel like it was his job. And if we put the leash on, like it was time to work, and there was no gray area. And as long as you set the tone from the beginning in the walk, he was good. Right. But if you didn't set that tone in the beginning, you know, I don't know. It very much comes across genetic with him, because even with my own dogs, I've had him out hiking, and with my own dogs, like no muzzle, and he's like totally good. But then, you know, he went and stayed with his parents for a couple months, and then he came back to me for boarding, and just
he was a little shit.
Yeah, he was kind of a little shit.
Some dogs are just like pushy like that. Like they just have those really strong personalities.
He has to live with somebody that's gonna
very firm boundaries.
Yeah, stay on top of him. And like dude, the thing is like Wensley knows, like I did so much free training for this dog because like I loved him. Like he's such a like,
he's awesome.
He was a very, they called him like the sloop. because he just when you pick him up, he would just kind of you know how dogs just kind of like melt and flip over, like this big like he's a good size, like little like 45, 55 pound little like pit, and he would just like fall over in your arms, and like he's such a sweet dog. Like he was really I really liked him, and I ended up putting some pretty fancy obedience on him as well. Yeah. But if you didn't stay on top of him, it was gonna like it was always a problem. Like I could always tell.
I had a little blue nose pit that was like that. Like the owner lived in a house with a lot of other people and a lot of other dogs, and there was constantly like dogs coming and going and a bunch of people, and the dog was just like, you know, like that bossy dog that's like, I gotta manage everything. I gotta manage this whole situation. Right. And so I didn't have any issues with the dog when it came to me for a board and train. Like I really didn't see any of that. And then when I did the go home lesson and I did like a follow up with the owner, and like you can see the dog really like pushes the owner, and the owner she was like more soft spoken and like very mellow, and this dog was like, you know, all right, I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. So it's like I have to meet that dog with the same energy.
Yeah, of course.
Like I will always be bossier than you. You know, that's kind of my thing. Like I will literally always be bossier than you. It's literally my job as the dog trainer to be bossier than you. Like I can't be bossed around by dogs.
Mm-hmm. That makes me think of someone that something that I heard from another trainer, who I won't mention on the podcast, but I will say that something that I've learned is a lot of times I believe that dogs mistake kindness for weakness.
Yeah.
Like, of course, I can be sweet to my dog. Like, and this is the thing. Like, people, they're gonna argue about like the semantics, and they're gonna say like, "Oh my God, I'm sweet to my dog all the time, and he loves it. He doesn't think." Like, I'm telling you, of course, like I love on my dog, and I'm very kind to my dog. But what I'm talking about is like when people go to the shelter or they bring home a puppy, and they don't. Like the word no doesn't exist. And not only does the word no not exist, the action of no doesn't exist. So like if I've got a little puppy and it, you know, crawls up my leg and is just chewing on me, like, yeah, like I'm going to scruff him. I'm going to pick him up. I'm going to say, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then I'm going to put him down and go, you know, and if he can't settle himself, I'll put him in the kennel, you know, and I'll try again later. But that's, to me, I didn't actually say no. I showed no. Right, I showed the dog, no, don't do that. But so many of these dogs, I just feel like they've never experienced that.
And that's why I talk about like correcting dogs so much, is because people do a really good job of teaching things, right? Like
to do.
Yeah, the dogs know how to do all the things. They get the lick mats. They have they have place, they have obedience, they have
a little ring bell,
they have
on the door
middle, they've got like more advanced obedience on their dogs, but their issue is the relationship that they have with their dogs, because people think that dog training is what your dog can do. But it's not. Like as far as behavioral mod goes, if your dog is doing a behavior that you don't like you have to look at the relationship that you have with that dog. If you can't get your dog to like stop doing something, I would argue that they don't really respect you that much. And I kind of use the analogy of like, do you ever remember having those substitute teachers that would come in and like you knew when that sub was there, like the class was going to be reckless because like
I was going to be a problem.
I know that it was you.
Of course you were.
You are definitely the poster
And I was
child.
the one in the background like, oh my God. Like,
no, but like those subs, when they would come in and kids like you would be like, "Oh, this is my time. I'm going to bully this teacher," you know? And then when like your regular teacher is there, because you have that relationship, because you have that respect, like the classroom doesn't act like that. And it's the same thing with dogs, and people who are struggling with their dogs are struggling with the relationship because they allow their dog to do essentially whatever they want. So that's why I talk so much about like, it's okay to tell your dog no, because people are really good at teaching all the things, but they just need permission to be able to like communicate to their dog like, "Hey, I don't like that you're doing that."
I just realized, like, I forgot where I was going earlier when I was saying that they mistake the kindness for weakness.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, you know, like you and I are friends. If literally any time I asked something of you, like I was just like, Meg, like come to Texas, and you just got on the plane and did it. And like I was like, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and you were just like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. At some point, like when you have that friend that you just know is never gonna say no, you have to almost check yourself, and you're like, am I taking advantage of this person? Because they always come through for me. They always, like, I know if I say this is where I want to eat, then that's where we're going to eat. And like I feel like that's the relationship that happens with people and their dogs, where I say that they mistake kindness for weakness, because it's like you just allow the dog to say, I want that, I'm gonna go get it. I want that, I'm gonna go get it. I want to do this, I'm gonna do that. And no one ever says, hey, don't do that. After a while, the dog is just like acting like a complete, idiot in front of you, because you never say no to anything. And that level of permissiveness, the dog is like, I just get away with everything.
Well, they're such opportunistic creatures. You give them the chance, they're going to start calling the shots. Like if nobody's telling them otherwise, why wouldn't they?
So you know what, that's another good kind of segue. Something else that I want to talk about is leash walking, which is, I know, not a very exciting subject for a lot of people.
Next.
But, you mean in regards to reactivity?
Yeah, and so like to me, again, like this all ties together. It all ties together.
Oh, yeah.
So the way, and I don't know why I don't think that I'm special in the way that I think about this, but I don't ever hear anyone else talking about it. So if this is the way other people see it, then just send me a message and let me know, because I want to know. I want to know, because the way I view leash walking is I just teach my dogs that they're not allowed to leave me. Like that is it. Like when I walk, you should also walk, and you should be. People are like, "Well, how much does the dog have to look at you?" And I'm just like, as long as they stop when I stop, then that's fine. And the way I do that is I usually just start by bringing the dog outside, and I don't even, people do like the about turns and inside turns and outside turns. I don't do that usually. Now, to me, all those about turns, the 180s, the backing up, all that stuff, to me, that's how you refine and shape how you want the heel to look. But to me, the general rule that I'm shooting for with like pet dogs is like, just because we're standing here and another dog walks by doesn't mean you're allowed to leave me to go to that dog, right? And I apply that to everything, whether it's a dog or a person or a bike or going to the grass or trying to get down the stairs or walking out of the front door. There's never a time in your life where you should be leaving me unless I've looked at you and said, like, break.
You can do this.
Go.
I think operating out of that principle is why neither of us actually teach. For most clients, we don't teach like a heel command on cue, because the clients will use it and abuse it, and then it becomes.
I don't I never ask my, like, of course in competition, my dog has a competition heel and she can heel beautifully, but we don't ever really do that walking down the street. And it's just like, as a rule of thumb, all of my dogs understand that, like, hey, just because there's things on the shelves doesn't mean that you should go touch them. And like, it's kind of a rule that you should just stay with me, and they default to that. And to me, that actually goes back to reactivity, because what I'm doing is I'm shaping the attitude of the dog, which is less of a self-service type attitude, where like the dog is constantly looking to just fulfill his own wants and needs and desires. The dog is not allowed to just self-fulfill because it sees things, it just goes to them. The dog understands, I have to stay with dad. And then I never end up with reactivity, because my dogs aren't in that self-service mindset all the time.
Yeah.
And it's an incompatible behavior to a degree also. If
of course.
You can't like lunge at the end of the leash and bark and cause a fuss if you are focusing on staying with dad or mom. Right.
One thing that I will say that people will hear this and then they'll think that they're doing it, but they're not, is the dogs only know to stay next to the owner because they feel the pressure of the leash.
Like it's constantly tight, you mean?
Right.
Like they're holding it.
Like people are like, well, I'm walking my dog at heel, right? But like what happens if you let go of that leash pressure? The dog keeps going forward because they're not actually paying attention to you. They're just paying attention to the feeling of that leash.
They're taking the behavior from the dog.
So let's clarify, and this is another big thing. When do I punish the dog? Right? When does the punishment happen and when does the reward happen? And I think a big game changer for a lot of just pet dog owners that don't own or that don't train dogs, I'm not punishing the dog when they get to the end of the leash. I'm actually looking for the moment that they check out, the exact moment that they check out. And people don't understand is that the dog checks out when they're still next to you. Mm-hmm. They don't check out when they've hit the end of the leash. You've
lost.
They're gone.
You're way gone. And so that's why I say, like, a lot of times I don't actually start off doing the about turns. I just stand and I just wait. And if the dog stays with me, then that's when I reward them. I wait for that voluntary check-in, and that's what I reward. And then as soon as we start moving, if they move towards anything that's not me, I'm going to put pressure on that leash and bring them back to me.
Yeah.
And you can do that with a slip lead. You can do that with a prong collar. You can do that with a martingale. But the thing is you need to make sure that you're communicating to the dog that it's the moment that you check out when all of this happens.
Right.
And that's how you get a dog that will just, like, my dogs just kind of walk with me, you know? And if we always do that same little motion of, like, giving them a little leash pop and then resetting them, if my dogs do get a little, like, excited or a little forward on the leash, if I just give them that little leash pop, they go, oh yeah, that's right, my bad, and they just come back. You know, it's like we're never really like heel, you know?
Oh no.
Like, heel.
I mean, I think like Lucy,
don't be a dumbass is the name of the game.
Yeah, Lucy and Minka are the only dogs of mine that actually know like a heel, you know, but most of it is just like come back, like stay, you know, if I ever have to like say something to them, it's like, hey, like, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, yeah. We'll come back over.
You know what's funny? Crew, as much of a hellion as he is for all of his antics, he's probably out of my three the most beautiful, reliable, like, loose leash heel. My sister is like, I'd rather potty Crew than any of the others. And I'm like, oh, I'd rather you not, just in case. But, like, Crew is my Malinois. He's my competition dog. He's a lot. But
he has the hill.
Has to be managed through obedience.
And
but
that's the
it's
other
a home
thing.
base for him. It's safe. It's
right.
like,
But that's the other thing that we should talk about is like some dogs, you have to be so much more strict in the little things.
It's like Porter.
Right.
yeah,
that little
Porter
pit.
and Crew.
Right. So, like, bro, you got to turn your phone off.
Sorry.
It's been going off.
Sorry.
If I have a dog that's like super reactive, I'm super strict about the heel. Like I will give you a pop on the leash for checking out. As soon as you check out, like pop. There has to be some sort of consequence to you checking out because I know you and I know what's coming next. Right? So like I'm not doing my due diligence if I don't stop you before you have that big explosive reaction.
You know the big part that you're talking about, like, you know, that you stop them the moment that they kind of start, you know, going into that behavior. I think one thing that a lot of pet clients don't understand is I will correct a dog for just being an idiot. Like the dog is just
bouncing around.
Like if I and here's the thing. I know it sounds so mean, but like if I get to a park and I pull the dog out of the car, and the moment his feet hit the ground,
he's like,
that dog
wowing.
is just zigzagging and spinning and like. To me, that's the same thing as like if you lived in another country and you came over here and I brought you to like a coffee shop.
And I was just acting a fool.
And you were just dancing, and I would have to get on you
like
and
if
say,
we go to like a fancy restaurant.
that's not the vibe.
Right.
That's not the vibe.
We don't do that here.
Like, yeah, we don't do that. And people think that's so crazy. I'll have clients, I watch them, they get the dog out of the car and the dog's just acting like an idiot, and they're like, correct it. Or I tell them, I'm like, hey, correct him. And they're like, for what? And I'm like, because he's being an idiot.
I think these are also semantics, but you could talk about interruption versus correction. Like correction, I kind of imagine as I'm correcting you because I want you to come back
barely
into
like
a certain
actually
behavior.
correct dogs.
That's
you know what I'm saying?
Really
like,
good. That's a really good
a
point.
correction. I don't allow the behaviors to get to the point where I have to like really correct a dog. I would say recently I had that like black shepherd monster. Like I had to give
Its
her
name was Monster.
Yeah, I had to give her a pretty firm like leash correction, but I mean other than that, I can't even I don't know.
But you probably only had to do that 1 or 2 times.
Yeah.
Like
But that's what I'm saying is like people think that like punish is like this big traumatic thing for dogs, you
Right.
know?
And
it's literally like I tell my owners it's like an elbow nudge. Like if you're acting wild and I'm like, "Hey, let's chill out a little bit."
that's not the vibe.
That's not the vibe.
Well, exactly what Wensley was saying was I've used the word correction a lot on this podcast, but with my clients, I really don't use that word very much because it is so open to interpretation, which everything is. I mean, at some point you're going to have to, put your hands on the leash and figure out, exactly how to get across to that animal. But I really like the word interruption because that is what I'm trying to do. Is I'm simply, my goal, and that's what I tell my clients. I go, look, my goal when the dog goes into that kind of, crazy, erratic, state of mind, I just want to interrupt that from continuing. And once I've interrupted that, we can go and do other things, right? We can go and have a training session. We can go and throw the ball. We can go and, do whatever we're going to do. But I feel like if you say, hey, the goal is to interrupt them, then they can actually almost kind of have a goal. Because if I say correct the dog, they go, well, I did, but he's still doing the behavior. Then it's like, okay, well, did I correct or not? But if I say, did you interrupt the dog? Then there's a measurable sort of
I think that makes
outcome.
sense in people's
It's like
minds.
you either, like, if he's still doing the behavior, then he hasn't been interrupted.
Right.
Because he's still carrying on.
Right.
Right? So that is the way that I look at it. And I know that's the way you look at it too, is like, yes, sometimes like it takes more force to interrupt some dogs over others. But most of the time, because most dogs have never been interrupted during, that behavior, that when you do, it doesn't take a lot.
Right.
Especially you just like, hey.
No, like, oh, my bad.
And
My bad.
You know what's funny? What's funny is I tell my clients, like, look, in the time that you work with me, I promise you, you will hear me talk to the dogs a lot. And people, some people are opposite. They're like, I put my headphones in, I don't speak at all. Of course, when I'm doing competition obedience, I'm actually pretty quiet. Unless I'm very strategic in what comes out of my mouth when I'm doing competition. But when I'm doing pet dogs,
You are like the biggest baby talker. You're like, oh, hello.
yeah.
Meg, that one time on FaceTime, you were like, do y'all use that voice in front of your clients?
No, you guys have like started that with me. Like, oh, the puppy
but look,
voice.
when I
now
correct
Coda's
dogs,
like,
I know Coda's
me?
like, oh, you're talking about me?
when
No,
I correct
we
dogs,
don't
it
need you over
normally
here.
it normally goes like
Props.
I correct the dog and I look at the dog and I'm like, why'd you do that? I'm like, don't do that.
I
And
started doing it's embarrassing. I like film training sessions, and then when I look back at them, I'll go out, they like, hit the end of the leash, they're just like trotting along, and I'm like, boop. Oh my God, what happened? And I like look back at the video and I'm like, boop. Like, why did I don't even say that with my own dogs, but it just is like a little noise effect that pairs with the leash pop, and the dog's like, oh.
Oh my God, what happened?
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
That's literally like I will, especially if it's like kind of a young dog and like I said, I don't want the dog to learn to leave me. I want the dog to kind of stay with me by default. So if the dog starts, there will be times where I want the dog to explore, and I'll let the dog know that that's what we're doing. But yeah, I will let the dog go out. I give him a little correction. The dog turns around and looks at me, and I go, oh my God, what happened? What happened? Because it's like I truly pretend like I don't know, and I start walking off, and the dog's like, oh, and they just learn to stay with me.
The best correction is
it's
the
like
one
when
they
a
don't
little
see
kid
coming.
falls,
Yeah.
and they get up, and you're like, oh my
Yeah, what'd you do, buddy? Like, sorry about that. Why'd you do that?
Well,
like,
also, I feel like having the baby voice for me kind of keeps your blood pressure down. It's like emotionless.
I need you to.
Oh, sorry. Hello, audience. I'm so sorry. I forgot we were doing a
Wensley's
podcast.
gonna have her back to the camera by the end of the
She's just wrapped up in the conversation.
No, it just
now.
it makes me feel less emotional. Like I'm operating out of a place of no emotion and just simply like doing what needs to be done, and having the little sing song like oh what happened like makes it real lighthearted. And
I don't say a lot.
You don't get frustrated with the dogs.
I don't say a lot because the owners say so much, and like my trainers say a lot, and I want the dog to like be just like that tuned into me that I don't have to be like, oh, but I say that. But if I have like puppies and shit, I'm like, oh, it's a puppies.
Exactly.
Well, you know,
I feel like more like young dogs, and at the the very beginning.
But if I'm doing like a
lesson,
behavioral mod dog, like
No.
you're gonna have to earn the baby talk from me.
Oh,
like that
you know what
dog
I'm saying?
Koa that we
like I'm not
boarded.
gonna be like the cutesy person until like we establish our relationship.
I agree with that 100%. But that's how we were with Koa in the house. We didn't talk to him at all. We just communicated with the leash until he, opened up.
This is the thing. People that listen like to podcasts, right, like this, and they they're gonna hear something and they're gonna take it very specifically, or they're gonna take it their own way. And anybody that listens to this and actually understands dogs knows exactly everything that we're talking about, and can read between the lines and can understand. Only the people that don't really know very well are the ones that take everything at face value, and they just don't understand dogs.
Oh yeah. Anytime I get like, I had like a few trainers reach out and like tell me, whatever.
They'll go, I always talk to dogs, or I never.
And it's like, that shows me that you have not been doing this very
you don't
long.
know. Yeah, you don't know, because
you talk to the experienced people and they're like, yeah, like we're all doing the same thing.
Yes.
All of the people who are actually running dog training businesses, working with clients, not just like training their own dogs for the sake of like the internet, like we're all doing the same thing. We're all mostly using positive reinforcement, getting dogs working for food and treats, and like
interrupting the bullshit.
yeah,
That's
like
really all
every
it
dog
is.
trainer,
But
that I
able
know.
to like understand that there's no cookie cutter way to condition a off-leash recall with the e-call. Like there's so many different ways.
there's a million different ways to train the dog, but like
to read the dog in front of you.
we're all basically doing
operating within the same framework.
to pretty similar shit.
Yeah.
We got to wrap this up, but
We just hit an hour.
before I think so, we videoed this and we got to talk about the band-aids on my face.
Oh yeah.
It's my fault.
It's Clayton's fault. Clayton's fault.
Clayton fault.
Clayton fault.
Clayton. Yeah, so Clayton and I went to the skate park yesterday, and there's a pump track, and I really wanted to try the pump track, but I've never done any sort of skate park thing. I've only gone down like hills.
Like big hills, or like what are we talking?
I mean, I think
In
like
Florida, she
But
has
I like-
some hills in her neighborhood that are. I mean, they're fun to go
She's a
down.
skater girl.
Yeah, she's definitely got some speed before.
Yeah.
She has.
I should be better at skating for how long I've done it for. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you don't, like when you're not surrounded by a bunch of people that do it.
Right. Anyways, we went to the skate park yesterday and I was doing great. And I went down and Clayton was like, I was like, I'm scared, Clayton. He's like, go.
That mean coach.
Just go. Like, what are you scared of?
at
What are
one-
you scared of?
At one point, she was like, she's like, I need you to like hold my hand, and I was like, okay. So I held her hand, and as
I was
she's
like,
going,
you're not going to let go, right?
yeah, she's like,
Did
you're not
you
gonna
let
let go.
go?
And I definitely
You
let
can't
go.
trust him, Meg. You should know not to trust him with that shit.
I know.
Definitely let go. But
And then she face planted?
No, listen, she went down the ramp many times successfully. Many times.
We gotta give her credit first. Okay?
Many times
Everyone.
successfully.
Yeah.
But then there was just one where it just,
It all went wrong.
yeah. Yeah, I whenever I ran over there, I knew you were going to be bleeding. I knew.
You definitely should have gotten stitches.
I saw you
it's
hit
not
your
that
face,
bad.
and I was like, shit, I know that's gonna be bloody. That was why when I ran over, I ran over and I looked down at her, and I was like, oh yeah, like you're definitely bleeding. And I was just like, hang on a second. And I went and got my phone.
Runs back up the ramp.
I gotta document this.
Here's the thing, truthfully, because like, I mean, for anyone that doesn't know, I've been skating like for 20 years or something like that, like very long time.
Yeah, Clayton's really, really good and made it look really easy.
So
He does.
here's the thing. So I've obviously eaten a lot of shit and fallen down like that many times. As someone that has eaten shit that many times, I realize that it's like, if you're gonna eat shit like that, then like I definitely want documentation. Like that's to me, it's like I've already eaten shit, so nothing else matters other than documenting it.
Clayton
at this
likes
point.
to share his epic fails on his old Instagram. He has a lot of, he's like, look at this
skate-
one video of me breaking my hip. And I'm like, why did you post that?
Yeah, so I went down and face planted and busted my chin open. People think I'm really cool now. They're like,
It's
oh
because
my
I put
gosh.
cool music to it.
I know.
96 White Bitter Beans.
It kind of looks like I have like a neck tattoo
It does, you
of
do
all
look-
of the blood.
But later when we were in the sun at the lake, you were like, kept saying, I don't feel good. And I just thought you had the laceration on your chin.
Oh
And you're
no,
like,
I
almost
definitely
passed out."
bounced my head
I'm
on
like,
the concrete
Meg, I
pretty
think you
hard.
have a concussion.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why I'll have a Band-Aid on my chin for the foreseeable future and maybe a cool scar.
At least a sick tan line if you keep those on.
Oh god. All right. Let's let the people know where to find you guys.
I think mainly Instagram. Austin Dog Culture on Instagram. I think it's like Austin_dog_culture.
Sure.
But if you just type in Austin Dog Culture, we come up.
That's
And
like
then
our company. I have a personal one that's just,
What's your personal, Wensley? Do you want to share?
it's Canine Crew and Co. K number 9. But you could just type in Wensley, and I'm the only Wensley that if anybody out there has ever met another Wensley, I'd like to know, because I've never met another one. So you could type that in, and
You'll find
the
her.
first one to pop
We'll
up.
also include you guys in the show notes. All right, so my road trip continues. We're wrapping up this podcast, and I'm loading up the dogs. We're hitting the road again in Austin today. Who knows where I'll be tonight?
So sad you're leaving us
sleeping in a
already.
van somewhere.
Sleeping in a van somewhere on the side of a road, probably. All right, guys. Thank you so much for letting me crash on your couch and visit and shadow and do all the fun things. And
Welcome.
thanks,
It
of
was
course.
a pleasure to have you. You're welcome back anytime, Meg.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for being on the podcast. And if you're listening, thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.